Get her out of my courtroom before she embarrasses herself. This is a court of law, not a support group for people who watch too many legal dramas. Ayesha Brathwaite stood still. 28 years old, pressed gray blazer, boots polished the way the army taught her, hands folded at the small of her back like she was on parade. We're here to answer the claim against my grandmother, my lady. Lawrence Strickland turned around slowly, looked her up and down the way a man looks at something he's already decided doesn't matter. Answer the claim? Sweetheart, do you even know what a statement of defense looks like? The courtroom laughed. The whole room. Even the sheriff's deputy by the door bit down on a smile. Eden bent down and picked up the folder. Strickland's elbow had knocked off their table when he walked past. Ayesha didn't move, didn't blink. Their grandmother watched from her wheelchair at the end of the table, silent, her hands folded over the hospital bracelet she still hadn't taken off. Nobody in that room knew it yet, but inside that dollar store folder was one question that would end Lawrence Strickland's 31-year career before the lunch recess. And I'll tell you right now, that courtroom got very quiet, very fast once she asked it. Let's get into the story. Wexford Mills, Nova Scotia. A little town on the South Shore where the fog comes in off the water like it pays rent, and where everybody knows your name, they just say it differently, depending on which side of the highway you grew up on. Juniper Hill sits on the east edge of town. 3.1 acres of spruce and granite and wild blueberry, and a green shingled house with a wood stove that's been ticking and popping through Nova Scotia winters since before the Trans-Canada was paved. Mabel Brathwaite bought that land with her husband Elton in 1961. Her people were black loyalists. They'd been on that shore, one way or another, for 200 years, and had spent most of those 200 years being told the land under their feet wasn't properly theirs. Deeds that never got registered. Grants that never got honored. So when Elton Brathwaite finally held a clean, registered deed in his hands, he framed the receipt. Hung it in the kitchen next to the crucifix. He worked the fish plant, drove a snowplow for the county in winter, and did roofing in between, and he never missed a payment. Not one, not once, not in 19 years. 3 generations grew up in that green shingled house. Mabel raised her son there. Her son raised 2 girls there, and when an icy stretch of Highway 103 took both parents on a February night 14 years ago, Mabel raised Ayesha and Eden there too. She was 67 then, already widowed, already tired. She raised them anyway, because that's what the woman did. She raised people. 40 years cooking at the elementary school in Wexford Mills, and half the town, every color of the town, had eaten something Mabel Brathwaite made with her own 2 hands. They called her Miss Mabel. Still do. The winter she turned 80, Mabel broke her hip on the back step. Surgery in Halifax, 3 weeks at the QEI, then the wheelchair, then the walker, then the wheelchair again. She came home smaller. But she still had coffee going by 6 every morning. Still sat by the front window watching the spruce trees do what spruce trees do. Still told her granddaughters the same thing Elton used to say, tapping the framed receipt on the kitchen wall. This land is paid for. This land is ours. Don't you ever let anybody take it from you with a piece of paper. Now, Ayesha, you need to understand who Ayesha Brathwaite was. Because Lawrence Strickland certainly didn't. She joined the Canadian Armed Forces at 19, combat engineer, 2 tours, 1 rotation in Latvia and 1 in the Middle East, 6 years of building bridges under time pressure and clearing routes where a mistake costs more than money. The Army teaches you a lot of things, but mostly it teaches you this. Preparation is not glamorous, and preparation is everything. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Her troop warrant officer, a granite block of a man named Reyes, used to say that a soldier who checks everything twice looks paranoid right up until the moment she looks like a genius. Ayesha checked everything twice. She came home at 25 when a training injury ended her career, took a job at the building supply in town, and kept the habit that had followed her through the whole Army. a green field message pad in her jacket pocket, the kind they issue you in basic. She wrote everything down. Everything. People in Wexford Mills thought it was a quirk. It was not a quirk. It was training. Eden was different. 19, first year at the community college in Bridgewater, the kind of sharp that doesn't announce itself. Eden read a page once and kept it forever. While Ayesha understood systems, how things get built, how they fail, where the load actually sits. Eden understood records, databases, registries, archives, the paper trail behind the paper. She could find a document the province forgot it ever scanned. Together, they were something nobody in Wexford Mills was expecting. But then, nobody in Wexford Mills was paying attention to the Brathwaite girls. They were paying attention to Preston Duquette. Duquette owned Duquette Shoreline Developments, the biggest outfit in 3 counties. And Duquette had plans for the east edge of town. Ocean View Estates, a boutique resort. 72 units and a marketing brochure with the word unspoiled in it 4 times. There was just one problem with unspoiled. People lived there. 5 black families, on land their grandparents and great-grandparents had scraped together, up on that ridge above the water, and one by one, over 4 years, those families went away. One sold for a number that looked good until you saw what the lot resold for. One got buried in a boundary lawsuit and settled just to make it stop. One got a tax sale notice on a technicality nobody could ever quite explain. Every single one of those files, everyone, had the Holmes lawyer's name on it. Lawrence Strickland. 31 years of property litigation. Corner office on the main street of Bridgewater. Brass letters on the glass. The man had not lost a land case since before Eden was born, and he liked to mention it, the way some men mention their golf handicap. 4 families gone. 4 lots cleared. Mabel Brathwaite was the last one on the hill. On a raw Tuesday in late March, a registered letter came to the green-shingled house. Eden signed for it because Mabel's hands were bad in the cold. Duquette Shoreline Developments was suing Mabel Brathwaite for possession of Juniper Hill. The claim said she had signed a deed transferring the property to a Duquette-numbered company on March the 3rd of the previous year for consideration of $1 and, quote, natural love and affection. Mabel read the letter twice. Then she set it down on the kitchen table, next to Elton's framed receipt on the wall, and she said quietly, the way she said everything, I have never signed my land away to any man alive. I would go into the ground first. Ayesha stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her grandmother's hands shake over that letter. And something in her chest went very still and very cold. The stillness she knew from overseas, the one that shows up right before you get to work. And if you think this story ends with an 81-year-old woman losing the last black-owned land on that ridge, stay right where you are. Because what this woman did over the next 19 days is going to change what you think one prepared person can do. Ayesha started making calls the next morning, on her break, standing in the lumber yard with her toque pulled down and her phone pressed to her ear. There are 11 law firms between Bridgewater and Liverpool. She called every single one. The first receptionist was pleasant and quick. I'm sorry, we have a conflict on that file. Conflict, meaning Duquette was already a client. The second firm said the same thing in softer words. The third lawyer actually came to the phone himself, and he was honest, which she almost appreciated. Miss, Lawrence Strickland is on the other side of that matter. You won't find anyone in this county who wants to be across from him. Find someone in Halifax. Halifax firms 4 through 7 quoted retainers. The kindest number was $6,000. One wanted 10 just to review the file. Ayesha stood in the cold with sawdust on her boots and did the math she'd already done. Her grandmother's savings, 40 years of school kitchens, came to $1,500 and change. Asha's own account had $800 and a truck payment. Firms 8 and 9 never called back. Firm 10 had a junior lawyer who listened to the whole story, went quiet, put her on hold for 5 minutes, and came back sounding genuinely sorry. We just can't take it on in the time frame. Firm 11's voicemail box was full. 11 calls. 11 doors. Eden tried the other route. Nova Scotia Legal Aid, then a legal clinic in Halifax that helps people who can't pay. She filled in every field of the intake form at 1 in the morning, attached every document, triple-checked the file sizes. The answer came back 4 days later. Thank you for your application. Current wait time for civil property matters is approximately 3 to 5 months. The hearing was in 3 weeks, 3 weeks against 3 to 5 months. The math didn't work. And here's the part I want you to sit with for a second. The math was never designed to work. Not for a retired school cook on a hill outside Wexford Mills. The system doesn't have to slam a door in your face if it can just make you wait in the hallway until your house is gone. Meanwhile, Strickland moved like a man on a schedule. 6 days after the claim was filed, a white crew cab pickup came up the gravel drive on Juniper Hill, and 2 men got out with clipboards and a survey tripod. They walked Mabel's land like it was a showroom. Tape along the fence line, photos of the house, the woodshed, the old apple tree Elton planted the year Ayesha's father was born. Eden went out on the step without her coat. "Can I help you?" One of them didn't even turn around. Pre-development survey, hon. New owners want updated plans. There are no new owners, Eden said, and her voice didn't shake, which she was proud of later. The man finally looked at her the way you look at a kid who's interrupted the adults. "That's not really our department. You'd want to raise that with the court." They were on the property for 51 minutes. Ayesha timed it from the window, wrote it in the green message pad. Time in, time out, plate number, descriptions. Because that's what you do, you log everything, and when they left, they drove over the flower bed and didn't close the gate. Mabel watched all of it from the front window and never said one word. But that evening her chest went tight and her color went gray, and Ayesha drove her into the emergency department with her flashers on the whole way. "Angina," the doctor said. "Stress will do it at her age." They kept her overnight for observation. Ayesha sat in the waiting room until almost 3 in the morning, under fluorescent lights, next to a vending machine that hummed like a generator, holding 2 cold double-doubles she'd bought out of habit and couldn't drink. Her grandmother was 81 years old, in a hospital bed, because 2 strangers had walked onto her land like the ink was already dry. And somewhere down the shore, Lawrence Strickland was sleeping just fine. Alvin Prosper came by the hospital the next day. 71 years old, lived 2 properties down the ridge his whole life, still splits his own wood. He brought a thermos of fish chowder and the particular look of a man who has seen this movie before. They ran the same play on the collies, over on the far side, he said, lowering himself into the chair with a grunt. Papers she swore up and down she never signed. By the time anybody who mattered would listen, the excavator was already parked on her lot. He looked at Ayesha, then at Eden. "Your grandmother's the last of us up there, you know that. They get Juniper Hill, the ridge is finished. 100 and some years of us on that ridge, finished." Ayesha didn't answer. She was turning the green message pad over and over in her hands. That night, Eden sat alone in Ayesha's truck in the hospital parking lot, engine off, windows fogging, and cried, not loud, not for anyone. Just tears coming down in a dark truck at 11 o'clock at night. Because she was 19, because her grandmother was upstairs on a heart monitor, because a man with brass letters on his door and a 31-year winning streak was 3 weeks away from taking the only home she'd ever known, and because not one person in the entire county would help them. Ayesha found her there 20 minutes later, opened the passenger door, climbed in, and put a hand on her sister's shoulder. She didn't say it's going to be okay. She didn't say we'll figure something out. 6 years in uniform teaches you that the comforting sentence is usually a lie you tell for your own benefit, and Ayesha didn't do that. She just sat there in the dark with her. And after a long while, Eden wiped her face with her sleeve and said, "So, what do we do?" Ayesha turned on the dome light. opened the message pad to a page near the back where she'd written something in small block capitals, the printing they drill into you so orders can't be misread. "I've been reading the claim again," she said. "The deed. It's dated March 3rd last year." So? "So think about March 3rd, Eden. Think hard." Eden stared at her, and then it landed, and you could watch it land, that fast, sharp click behind her eyes, like a breaker snapping closed. "March 3rd, Eden whispered. "Grandma was in Halifax." Ayesha nodded once. "Post-op, 4th floor of the QEII, 200 kilometers from Bridgewater, with a surgical drain-in and a nurse charting on her every couple of hours. And the affidavit attached to that deed swears she signed it in person, at Strickland's office, on that exact day." The parking lot was dead quiet. Just the buzz of the light standard overhead. "They forged it," Eden said. "They forged it," Ayesha said. And for the first time since the registered letter, something other than dread showed up in that truck. Not relief, not confidence. Smaller than that, and harder. A direction. I'm going to step out of the story for 1 second here, because I need to say this. I have watched grown professionals with letters after their names fold up over less pressure than what was sitting on these two that night. No lawyer, no money. Sister on one side, heart monitor upstairs, undefeated opponent across the county. And their response was not panic. It was a to-do list. You cannot teach that in 19 days. Somebody raised that into them. The next morning, Ayesha was at the kitchen table before the sun cleared the spruce trees, and she stayed at that table, or at the Bridgewater Library, or at the registry counter, for 19 straight days. She took her banked vacation from the building supply. All of it, at once. Her boss asked if everything was all right, and she said, "Family matter," and that was the entire conversation. She read the Nova Scotia Land Registration Act the way she used to read a demolition manual, front to back, then back to front, then the parts everyone skips. She read what makes a deed void instead of just voidable, and trust me, that one-word difference is a canyon. She read the rules about affidavits of execution, the sworn statement where a witness swears to God and the court that they personally watched the signature happen. She filled the green message pad, then bought a coil scribbler at the drugstore, and filled half of that. The librarian in Bridgewater, a quiet white-haired woman named June Pelletier, watched Hodder come in at opening and leave at close for 4 days straight before she said anything. On the 5th morning, there was a book waiting at Ayesha's usual table, a worn practice manual on civil procedure, the kind law students used. A sticky note on the cover, small, careful handwriting. "You didn't get this from me." That was the only kindness anybody outside the family offered them in 19 days, and Ayesha never forgot it. Eden worked the records. The old laptop with the cracked hinge at the kitchen table across from her sister into the small hours. She pulled the parcel register for Juniper Hill and traced every registered instrument back to 1961. She pulled the corporate registry filings on Duquette's numbered company, and she built a timeline on the kitchen wall, right under Elton's framed receipt. Index cards and red wool string, dates down the left side, names down the right. March 3rd, date on the deed, and the date of Grandma's hip surgery, 200 kilometers apart. And then, on the 11th night, at 1:40 in the morning, Eden found the thing that turned a family's word against a lawyer's word into something no judge could look away from. The affidavit of execution on that deed had been sworn in front of a commissioner of oaths named Dwight Ferris. Rubber stamp, signature, the works. Eden, being Eden, didn't take the stamp at face value. She checked the provincial roll of commissioners. Dwight Ferris's appointment as a commissioner of oaths had expired 14 months before the date on that affidavit. Never renewed. She read the screen 3 times. Her hand was actually shaking on the trackpad, and Eden's hands don't shake. The sworn document holding up Duquette's entire claim had been stamped by a man who, on the date in question, had no more legal authority to commission an oath than the toaster. A signature from a woman who was in a hospital bed in another city. An oath sworn before a man with a dead stamp. The deed wasn't just suspicious. It was a lie standing on another lie. Every night they rehearsed. And you have to picture this, because I think it's my favorite part of the whole story. Ayesha, standing in the hallway in her sock feet, running her submissions out loud, and Eden sitting cross-legged on the stairs, playing Lawrence Strickland, and playing him mean. My lady, this woman has no standing, no training, and no business addressing this court. And Ayesha, answering, flat and level. My lady, Rule 34 permits a lay representative with leave of the court. My grandmother is present, and she consents. Again, Eden would say, colder this time. He's going to talk over you. He's going to use your first name. He's going to call you sweetheart in front of the judge. And Ayesha ran it again. First run-through, day 3, her voice cracked halfway. Day 9, her hands still curled into fists when Eden sneered at her. Day 15, she got through the whole thing like she was reading a weather report. That's not talent, folks. That's reps. Drills until the fear gets bored and leaves. On the last night, the night before the hearing, Eden said, the thing that Ayesha wrote in block capitals on the last page of the message pad and underlined twice. Don't try to outlawyer him, Ayesha. He's got 31 years of courtroom in his mouth, and you've got 19 days. You will not win a talking contest with Lawrence Strickland. Eden looked at her sister. Make him answer one question. The right question. 1. Ayesha held her eyes for a second. Then she picked up her pen and wrote a single sentence under the underlined words, and turned the pad face down. Eden asked what it said. You'll hear it, Ayesha said, when he does. The morning of the hearing was cold and clear. One of those March mornings on the South Shore, where the frost makes the whole world look freshly painted. Ayesha wore the gray blazer from her release ceremony. Eden wore her good sweater and carried the folders, dollar store folders, plastic covers already cracking at the spine, holding every certified record 19 days of no sleep and no help had produced. Mabel was on the ramp Ayesha had built off the front step. Wheelchair brake set, travel mug of coffee in both hands, steam curling up into the cold. She looked at her granddaughters a long moment, 28 and 19. Orphaned on a winter highway, raised on a cook's wages, and a piece of land somebody had decided was worth more without Brathwaites on it. 40 years I fed this town's children, Mabel said. Every single one of them. I told the same thing when they came through my line. Stand up straight. Look at me when you speak. And don't you ever let anybody make you feel like you're taking up space that isn't yours. She reached out and straightened Ayesha's lapel with 2 crooked fingers. You are not taking up space today. You are taking it back. Ayesha slid the green message pad into her inside pocket, right over her heart, which is where the Army teaches you to keep the things you cannot lose. And the Brathwaite women went down off Juniper Hill toward the Justice Center in Bridgewater, where Lawrence Strickland, undefeated since 1993, was already inside straightening his cufflinks and expecting to be back at his office by noon. He had no idea what was coming up that hill road toward him. But hold on, because the night before at 11:52 p.m., Ayesha had almost missed the last piece. She was at the kitchen table, eyes burning, coffee stone cold, running her document checklist one final time, because slow is smooth and smooth is fast, when she decided to refresh the online court file one last time. Just to be thorough. Just because Warrant Reyes's voice in her head said, check it again. And there it was, a new filing. A supplementary affidavit of execution, submitted through the e-filing portal by L. Strickland, time-stamped 6:41 that morning, barely 26 hours before the hearing. Ayesha clicked it open with her heart going like a 2-stroke. The new affidavit quietly swapped the story. It no longer said Mabel signed at the office in Bridgewater on March 3rd. Now it said the deed had been signed, quote, at or about the stated date, at a location convenient to the transferor. Vague. Greasy. Lawyer careful. Wesley, force of habit from another story. Ayesha sat back from the table and heard the question form in her head, fully assembled, like a bridge going up in one lift. Why would a man fix his sworn evidence at 6:41 in the morning, the day before a judge reads it? Unless he already knew the original couldn't survive daylight. He knew. Strickland knew the deed was rotten, and instead of pulling the claim, he was patching holes in the dark. Ayesha called Eden downstairs, turned the laptop around, and pointed. Eden read it in 10 seconds flat. "That's it, isn't it?" Eden said quietly. "That's your question." Ayesha took out the message pad, opened it to the last page, and added one line under the sentence she'd hidden for 4 days. Then she closed it. "Tomorrow," she said. "The Bridgewater Justice Center smells like floor wax and wet wool in March." Ayesha noticed that first, the way she noticed everything, and then the low ceiling, the fluorescent tube flickering above the gallery, the radiator knocking under the window like it wanted in on the proceedings. Small courtroom. Small town. Fence disputes and small claims and speeding tickets, mostly. Today it was going to decide whether an 81-year-old woman kept the land her family had held for 63 years, on a ridge people had been on for 200. Strickland was already set up at the applicant's table. Charcoal suit, leather briefcase the color of good whiskey, one junior associate beside him in a matching navy tie, both of them arranged like a brochure photo. Across the aisle, the respondent's table held 2 cracked plastic folders and a green Army issue message pad. Ayesha and Eden sat down. Behind them, Mabel's wheelchair clicked into place at the end of the row, and she folded her hands over the hospital bracelet she'd refused to cut off because, she said, it was evidence, and Miss Mabel was not wrong. The gallery was nearly empty. Alvin Prosper in the second row in his good jacket and his work boots. 2 neighbors from the ridge, June Pelletier from the library, at the back pretending to read, and one more person, a woman in the far corner, mid-50s, dark blazer, leather portfolio on her knee, watching everything with the kind of attention that doesn't blink. Nobody knew who she was. Not yet. Remember her. All rise. Supreme Court of Nova Scotia, Justice Carol Bissonnette presiding. Bissonnette came in like weather, 60-ish, steel gray bob, reading glasses on a chain, the face of a woman who has been lied to professionally for 3 decades and has developed antibodies. She sat, opened the file, and swept the room once over the top of her glasses. "Be seated. This is Duquette Shoreline Developments and 421-11782 Nova Scotia Limited against Mabel Brathwaite, an application for possession. Mr. Strickland." Strickland rose, buttoned his jacket, gave the bench a warm little nod like they summered together. "My lady, this is about as straightforward as these matters come. My clients hold a registered deed to the lands at Juniper Hill, executed by the respondent in March of last year. Registered, sworn, done. We're simply asking the court to give effect to a completed transaction. I'd be surprised if we need more than 20 minutes. He smiled the smile of a man who had said some version of that sentence 400 times and had never once been wrong in this building. Bissonnette looked at the other table. "Is the respondent represented?" Ayesha stood, her chair scraped, loud in the quiet. "My lady, my name is Ayesha Brathwaite. This is my sister, Eden Brathwaite. The respondent is our grandmother. She's present and consents to my speaking on her behalf, and I'd ask the court's leave to do so, given that we contacted 11 firms and none would act." And that was when Strickland turned around, slowly, and delivered the line, and the courtroom laughed, and even the deputy smirked, and Strickland's elbow sent their folder to the floor as he spread his arms to the room, like a man accepting applause. "Get her out of my courtroom before she embarrasses herself. My lady, honestly, this is a court of law, not a support group." Bissonnette did not laugh. She looked at Ayesha over the glasses for a long, flat moment. "Ms. Brathwaite, do you understand what proceeding you're standing in?" "Yes, my lady. An application for possession founded on a deed, which means the applicant bears the burden of establishing a valid conveyance. We intend to show this court that the deed is not merely contested, it is void. And we can do it with 3 documents. The room shifted. Nothing you could record. Just the air changing, the way it does on the ridge before the fog turns to rain. Bissonnette's eyebrows rose exactly 1 millimeter. Leave is granted. Proceed carefully. Strickland's smile stayed on his face, but something behind it checked its footing. He recovered fast, because 31 years is 31 years. He put the deed up on the screen. Mabel Brathwaite's name. March 3rd, the witness's signature. Dwight Ferris's commissioner stamp on the affidavit of execution, round and official and confident. The document speaks for itself, my lady. Signed, witnessed, sworn, registered. I'm at a loss as to what he let the pause do the insulting for him. A family member believes she's going to contest. Ayesha stood. My lady, may I approach the original? Strickland hesitated. 1 second, maybe a second and a half. If you were watching for it, and Ayesha was watching for it, it was a confession all on its own. She took the document, read it once, top to bottom, set it down, and printed one line in the message pad. Strickland leaned back. Is the young lady quite finished with her inspection? He hit young lady the way you'd flick a cigarette. Ayesha didn't look at him. She looked at the judge. My lady, the respondent tenders Exhibit 1. Certified records from the QEII Health Sciences Center in Halifax, confirming that on March 3rd of last year, Mabel Brathwaite was an admitted inpatient recovering from hip replacement surgery. Admitted March 1st. Discharged March 19th. She paused, and she let the radiator knock twice into the silence. The affidavit sworn in support of this deed states that my grandmother signed it in person. In Bridgewater on March 3rd. My grandmother was in a hospital bed 200 kilometers away, with a surgical drain in her side. She did not sign this document because she could not have been in the room where this document says she signed it. Nobody laughed. Nobody coughed. Alvin Prosper leaned forward with both hands on the rail. Lawrence Strickland stood absolutely still, and for the first time that morning his mouth was fully closed. Bissonnette looked at him with a face like a closed door. Mr. Strickland. Response. And here's where you find out why the man hadn't lost since 1993. He took 3 seconds, squared his cuffs, and came back swinging. My lady, hospital records establish admission, not confinement. Patients receive day passes. Patients are transported for appointments. Perhaps the date on the affidavit is imprecise, a scrivener's error as to the precise day, hardly fatal. He turned toward Ayesha without actually looking at her, the way you'd address a draft coming under a door. What my friend, and I use the term loosely, what this untrained young woman is offering the court is speculation stitched to a hospital record. She has no handwriting expert, no witness, no legal training whatsoever. I move to give this exhibit no weight absent proper foundation. And frankly, my lady, I question whether this entire performance should continue. His junior permitted himself a small smile. Nobody else did, and the room held its breath, because this was the hinge. Ayesha felt her stomach drop through the floor, felt her fingers go cold around the pen, because if Bissonnette bought the day pass theory, everything else got harder. Bissonnette drew a breath to rule, and Eden stood up. My lady, may I speak to the commissioner's stamp? Every head in the room turned. 19 years old, good sweater, voice quieter than her sister's but carrying to the back wall. Strickland's eyes narrowed. He'd prepared for one of them. Bissonnette considered, then nodded once. Briefly, Eden held up a single page, Exhibit 2, a certified extract from the Provincial Roll of Commissioners of Oaths. The affidavit of execution on this deed was sworn before Dwight Ferris. According to the province's own records, Mr. Ferris's appointment expired 14 months before the date on that affidavit. It was never renewed. She set the page down and folded her hands, steady as a level. Whatever day my grandmother did or didn't get a day pass, my lady, the oath holding this deed up was administered by a man with no authority to administer oaths. The affidavit isn't weak, it's void, and a registered deed resting on a void affidavit of execution is a house with no foundation. The gallery stirred audibly. June Pelletier had stopped pretending to read. The woman in the dark blazer had not moved a muscle, but her pen had. Strickland wanted his feet before Eden sat. Objection. The commissioner's administrative status is a technicality that does not touch the underlying. Overruled, Bissonnette said, flat as slate. Sit down, Mr. Strickland. He sat. His jaw did something complicated. The junior slid him a note and Strickland didn't read it. Bissonnette took off her glasses, looked at the clock and said, "We'll take 30 minutes. And Mr. Strickland, she let it hang just long enough. Use them well." The gavel came down, and the room exhaled all at once. Strickland had his phone out before he cleared the side door. Ayesha, packing her folders square the way you pack a kit bag, caught 4 words through the closing door. "No, listen, we've got a problem. Who was on the other end? Duquette? Ferris? Somebody worse?" Didn't matter. Not yet. Out in the corridor, Eden noticed her sister's hands. They were shaking. First time all day. "He almost got the hospital records sidelined," Ayesha said quietly. "If she'd gone with him on that." "She didn't," Eden said, "and we've still got your question, the one you won't tell me." Ayesha touched the message pad through her jacket, over her heart. "I know." Behind them, wheels on tile. Mabel rolled into the corridor, looked her granddaughters up and down. One shaking, one steady, both still upright, and took a hand of each in her crooked fingers. "Whatever happens in there," she said, "your grandfather is watching this, and he has not sat down since it started." And somewhere down that corridor, a 31-year winning streak was pacing a stairwell, sweating through a charcoal suit, trying to patch something that 2 sisters with dollar store folders had already cracked down the middle. When court resumed, Strickland looked different. Not beaten, adjusted. Jacket unbuttoned now. Tie a 1/4 inch off center. Little things. The kind of things only somebody trained to read people would clock. Ayesha clocked all of them. He came out attacking, because when you can't defend the document, you go after the people holding it. "My lady, before we continue, I must put my concern on the record." He planted both hands on the table. "The respondent is being represented, and I use the word charitably, by an ex-soldier with a high school diploma and a teenager with a laptop. What this court witnessed this morning is not legal argument. It is internet research delivered with confidence, and I'd urge the court to weigh it accordingly. We do not let people build bridges without an engineer, my lady. We should not let them dismantle registered conveyances without counsel." He sat down, satisfied, the specific satisfaction of a man who believes he has just reminded the room who the adults are. Bissonnette regarded him for a long moment over the glasses. "Mr. Strickland," she said, "the leave of this court has been granted and is not up for renegotiation. The exhibits before me are certified records of a hospital and of the province of Nova Scotia. Whatever else they may be, they are not Google." She turned. "Ms. Brathwaite, anything further?" Ayesha stood. Slowly. The radiator knocked. The bad fluorescent tube flickered over the gallery. "My lady, I have one question for Mr. Strickland." Bissonnette nodded. "Ask it." Ayesha didn't cross the floor toward him. Didn't need to. She stood where she was, in her release ceremony blazer, at a table furnished from a dollar store, in a courtroom that had laughed out loud at her 3 hours earlier, and she looked Lawrence Strickland dead in the eye, and the look on his face said, "Go on." Then, "Girl, ask your little question. Mr. Strickland, if this deed is genuine, if it is exactly what you told this court it is, signed, sworn, and done, then why did you file a rewritten affidavit of execution through the court portal at 6:41 yesterday morning, 26 hours before this hearing, changing where and when my grandmother supposedly signed it?" Silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind with mass. The kind you feel on your eardrums like depth. The radiator did not knock. Somewhere behind Ayesha, Alvin Prosper's work boots scraped the floor as he gripped the rail, and a single sharp breath came from the direction of June Pelletier. Strickland did not answer. 1 second. 2. 3. Bissonnette leaned forward, and her voice had frost on it. "Mr. Strickland, the question is now the court's. Answer it." He cleared his throat. "That was a routine correction, my lady. Housekeeping. Conforming the language of the affidavit, to the general practice. Ayesha didn't raise her voice. Housekeeping. On sworn evidence, the day before a judge reads it. She turned to the bench. My lady, Exhibit 3. The court's own e-filing log, showing the supplementary affidavit submitted by Mr. Strickland at 6:41 a.m. yesterday, and a side-by-side of the two versions. The original swears my grandmother signed in person at his office in Bridgewater on March 3rd. The replacement says at or about the stated date, at a location convenient to the transferor. She laid the pages down flat and square, the way her grandmother used to lay out lunch trays for 600 kids. If the original affidavit were true, it would not need to become vaguer the night before court. You don't blur a story that's real. You blur a story that's about to be checked. Her voice never lifted, never performed. Mr. Strickland rewrote his evidence at dawn because he knew the original could not survive this room. He didn't think anyone would pull the hospital file. He didn't think anyone would check a commissioner's roll from 14 months back. He didn't think anyone would refresh the court portal at midnight. She paused. 1 beat. 2. He didn't think anyone up on that hill was watching. We were. You could hear the fluorescent tube buzzing at the back of the room. That was the only sound in it. Strickland came up out of his chair, with his face going red from the collar up. This is outrageous. I will not be cross-examined by a Mr. Strickland. Bissonnette's voice went through the room like a blade through netting. You will sit down. You will moderate your tone. And you will answer the question I have now put to you twice. Why was your affidavit rewritten yesterday morning? And Lawrence Strickland, 31 years, 400 hearings, a man who billed $600 an hour for his words, opened his mouth and closed it, and opened it again, and nothing came out. Nothing. And in the back corner, the woman in the dark blazer sat perfectly still with her hands folded on her portfolio. And if you looked closely, very closely, you could see that she was nodding. One question. That's all it took. One question from a lumberyard employee in a 5-year-old blazer, standing in a courtroom that had laughed at her before she'd said 10 words. If that moment did to you what it did to that room, hit the like button right now. And send this to somebody who's been told they don't belong where they're standing, because we're not done. The best part is what the judge did next. Bissonnette didn't speak right away. She laid the 4 documents out in front of her. The deed, the hospital records, the commissioner's roll, the 2 affidavits side by side. And she looked at them the way you look at a puzzle somebody has already solved for you. The courtroom waited. Strickland sat with his hands flat on the table. His junior had quietly closed his briefcase, that small unconscious movement that tells you everything about what a man expects to happen next. Bissonnette put her glasses back on. I've heard enough. She folded her hands. The court finds the deed advanced by the applicant's void, and I want the record to reflect precisely why, because there are 3 independent grounds, and any one of them would do. First, the respondent was an admitted hospital inpatient in Halifax on the date the original affidavit swears she executed this instrument in Bridgewater, and no evidence of any day pass, transport, or attendance has been offered, because none exists. Second, the affidavit of execution was purportedly sworn before an individual whose appointment as commissioner had expired 14 months earlier. It is a nullity, and the registration built on it fails with it. Third, counsel's own conduct. The substitution of materially vaguer sworn evidence at 6:41 yesterday morning is inconsistent with any honest belief in the original instrument, and I draw the inference accordingly. She looked directly at Strickland, and her voice, which had been procedure all day, became granite. The application is dismissed. Mabel Brathwaite's title to the lands at Juniper Hill is confirmed, undisturbed and undisputed, with costs against the applicants on a solicitor and client basis. And she paused, and the radiator knocked once, and then she finished it. Furthermore, I am referring this file to the Nova Scotia Barristers Society, and I am directing that a copy of the record be delivered to the RCMP for investigation of forgery, fabrication of evidence, and uttering a forged document. Mr. Strickland, in 30 years on and before this bench, I have rarely seen a file like this one. You may consider your 20 minutes concluded. The gavel came down. One strike. It bounced off the low ceiling and the wet wool air and the flickering tube light, and it landed somewhere in the chest of every single person in that room. For one full second, nobody moved. Then Alvin Prosper stood up. Slowly, the way a 71-year-old man with wood-splitter knees stands when a thing matters enough to hurt for, and he brought his big hands together. Once. Twice, June Pelletier stood, then the neighbors from the ridge, then the whole second row. It wasn't thunder. It was maybe 10 people clapping in a small courtroom in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. And I promise you it sounded like 200 years finally being heard. Mabel Brathwaite sat in her wheelchair with tears running down into her collar, and her hand pressed flat against the hospital bracelet on her wrist. Ayesha knelt on one side of the chair. Eden knelt on the other. Nobody said anything. 3 people in 63 years have paid for land and a framed receipt on a kitchen wall that had turned out, in the end, to be telling the truth the whole time. Strickland packed the whiskey-colored briefcase without looking at anyone. Not the bench, not the gallery, not the old woman in the chair. He went out the side door with his junior trailing him, heads down, and in the corridor he passed Alvin Prosper standing by the water fountain. Alvin didn't say one word. He just looked at him, with 71 years of that ridge in his eyes, and Lawrence Strickland found somewhere else to look. That was enough. The woman in the dark blazer waited until the room had nearly emptied. Then she stood, straightened her jacket, and walked to the respondent's table. "My name is Rosalind Chukwu," she said. "I'm senior counsel with a national legal clinic. We act on land title and dispossession cases in historic black communities across the country. I was here to watch a different matter on today's docket." She glanced at the door Strickland had gone through, then back. "I stayed for yours." She looked at Ayesha, then at Eden, and she said the sentence that Eden still has written on a card above her desk. "I have supervised Artsling students, with 3 years of law school behind them, who could not have done what the 2 of you did in this room before lunch." She set a business card on the table between the cracked plastic folders. "We fund a program, investigators, paralegals, and every year, a full sponsorship through law school for someone the profession overlooked. Both of you, if you want it." Eden looked at Ayesha. Ayesha looked at Mabel, and the old woman smiled the smile that starts slow and takes the whole face with it, and costs a woman her last scrap of composure, and she said, "Well, go on then. Answer the lady. You weren't raised to keep people waiting." Ayesha picked up the card. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. 6 months later, Eden started at Dalhousie in Halifax, fully sponsored, double focus, property law and civil rights. When her first-year advisor said that was ambitious, she told him she'd already won a case, and he decided not to pursue it. Ayesha took the investigator position with Rosalind's clinic, working land title files across the Maritimes. And yes, she still carries a Greenfield message pad, and yes, she bought a fresh one her first week. And when the clerk at the stationery store asked if she was a reporter, she said, "No, I just like to be squared away." Back on Juniper Hill, the green-shingled house is still standing. The wood stove still ticks. Mabel is out of the wheelchair more days than she's in it now, and every morning she has her coffee at the front window watching the spruce do what spruce does, grow. 3 families who used to live on that ridge got in touch after the hearing. Ayesha and the clinic pulled their old files. 2 of them had affidavits stamped by Dwight Ferris. Same dead stamp, same lie. Both of those cases have now been reopened, and one of those families has already been offered their lot back. As for the rest of it, and I know you were going to ask, because you always ask, and you should. Lawrence Strickland was disbarred in November. In January, the RCMP charged him and Dwight Ferris with forgery and uttering forged documents. Strickland's trial is set for the fall, and he has been advised, I'm told, to find very good counsel. Preston Duquette's company quietly withdrew every remaining claim on the ridge. The resort brochure disappeared from the website, and Duquette himself has not been seen at the Bridgewater Justice Center since. Nobody on the South Shore says the name Strickland the way they used to. Alvin Prosper told his wife about the whole thing over supper, and she asked him if he thought things were finally changing around Wexford Mills. And Alvin thought about it for a good long minute, the way he does, and then he said, 71 years I've been on that hill. First time I ever watched the paper lose. Ayesha Brathwaite had no law degree, no money, no firm, no friends in that building. She had a grandmother who taught her she belonged in any room she stood in, a sister who could find the truth in a filing cabinet, 6 years of training that taught her to check everything twice, and one question that a 31-year winning streak never saw coming. I chose this story because I am tired, genuinely tired, of watching people get measured before they've opened their mouths. She walked into that courtroom as a punchline and walked out with the record. So if this one got to you, I need 3 things from you. First, hit subscribe, because stories like this only get told if you keep showing up for them, and you always do. Second, share this with somebody who's been laughed at, counted out, or told to leave the room. Send it to them right now. Don't wait. And third, drop a comment and tell me straight. If it was your grandmother's land, no lawyer, no money, 3 weeks on the clock, would you have walked up that courthouse ramp? And hey, if you think you caught everything, run it back. There's a detail in the first 2 minutes that tells you exactly how this ends. And I promise you missed it. We'll see you in the next one.